The hallway was full of laughter that Tuesday morning. Lockers slamming shut, sneakers squeaking against linoleum floors, voices bouncing off those clean white walls. Just another day at Jefferson High School. Just another crowd of teenagers moving between classes, carrying backpacks and phones and all those small worries that feel big at 16. Kaliegh Garris was standing by her locker when it happened. Black girl, natural hair pulled back in a careful puff, wearing that same navy sweater she'd worn 100 times before. Nothing unusual about the moment. Nothing that should have marked it as different from any other morning. But then Marcus walked by with his friends. Basketball player, popular kid, the kind who always had something to say. And on this particular morning, what he had to say was loud enough for everyone to hear. "Yo, Kaliegh, your hair looked like a Brillo pad today." The words hung in the air. Simple words, common words, words that probably seemed harmless to him, maybe even funny. Just a joke, right? Just a comment. Just something to get a laugh from his boys as they passed through the hallway on their way to third period. But here's what you need to understand about words like that. They don't land soft, they land heavy. They carry weight that goes back further than that hallway, further than that school, further than you might think when you're just trying to get through your Tuesday morning. The laughter came quick. His friends joined in, that easy kind of laughter that comes when somebody else is the target. A few other students glanced over, some smiled, some looked away. The hallway kept moving. People kept walking. The world didn't stop. Kaliegh's hand froze on her locker door. She didn't cry, didn't yell, didn't turn around and make a scene. She just stood there for a moment, fingers pressed against cold metal, feeling something shift inside her chest. Something small and sharp, like a stone settling at the bottom of a river. The air changed. You could feel it if you were paying attention. That sudden thickness, that weight that appears when respect leaves a room and shame tries to take its place. But most people weren't paying attention. Most people had already moved on to their next class, their next conversation, their next moment. Kaliegh closed her locker slowly. She adjusted the strap on her backpack. She walked to class with her head up, face neutral, breathing steady. From the outside, you might have thought nothing happened at all, but something did happen. It's hard to explain to people who haven't felt it, how a single sentence can carry centuries, how a joke about hair isn't really about hair at all. It's about what's acceptable, what's beautiful, what deserves to exist in public spaces without apology. It's about who gets to decide. Brillo pad, steel wool, kitchen scrubber. She'd heard variations of it before. Different words, same message. Your natural state is wrong. Your texture is a problem. Your hair, the hair that grows from your own scalp, is something to be mocked, something to be fixed, something that marks you as less than. This wasn't the first time. That's what people don't understand. It's never the first time. When she was 9, a girl at summer camp asked if she could touch it, then pulled her hand back quick like she'd been burned. When she was 12, her aunt suggested she do something with it before picture day. When she was 14, a boy she liked told her she'd be prettier if she straightened it. Each time, someone took a piece. Each time, the message was clear. You need to change. But here's what's cruel about it. The way it hides behind smiles and laughter. The way people say these things casually, like they're offering helpful advice. The way they act surprised when you don't laugh along. When you don't take it as the compliment they somehow think it is. Kaliegh sat through her English class that morning, copying notes about metaphors and symbolism. But her mind kept drifting back to that hallway, to Marcus's voice, to the laughter, to the way nobody said anything. Not one person stepped in. Not one person said, "Hey, that's not cool." Not one teacher who might have been nearby. Not one friend who witnessed it. The silence was loud. The silence agreed. She thought about her mother's words from that morning at breakfast. Hold your head high, baby. Don't let nobody make you small. Easy to say over oatmeal and orange juice. Harder to do when you're standing in a public hallway, surrounded by people, feeling completely alone. The thing about public humiliation is that it's designed to teach you a lesson. Not a lesson about kindness or respect. A lesson about your place. about what happens when you exist as yourself, unapologetically, about the price of not conforming. And the lesson works. Over time, it works. You start checking mirrors more often. You start planning your hair around events, around who might see you, around what comments you might have to endure. You start making yourself smaller, quieter, more acceptable. You start apologizing for taking up space. Kaliegh looked down at her notebook. The page was full of words she'd written without thinking, words about figurative language and literary devices. But all she could think about was how words work in real life, how they build walls, how they draw lines, how they tell some people they belong and others they don't. The bell rang. Students gathered their books. Another class ending, another transition, another moment passing into memory. But some moments don't pass. Some moments settle. They sink down into the soft parts of you and make a home there. They change the way you see yourself in mirrors and photographs. They change the way you walk into rooms. Kaliegh Garris left that English classroom with perfect posture and a calm expression. But inside, in that quiet place where shame and anger meet, something was shifting. A decision was forming, still wordless, still unclear, but growing nonetheless. Because here's what they don't tell you about humiliation. It doesn't just hurt. Sometimes, if you're strong enough, if you're stubborn enough, if you refuse to let it break you completely, sometimes it teaches you something they never meant for you to learn. Sometimes it teaches you that the problem isn't you. Kaliegh stood in front of her bathroom mirror that night, hands gripping the edges of the sink. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting that harsh white glow that makes everything look exactly as it is. No shadows to hide in, no soft angles to make things prettier than they are. She stared at her reflection, looked at her hair, really looked at it, the way you examine evidence at a crime scene. Tight coils, dark and dense, forming a crown around her face. Hair that had been growing from her scalp since she was born. Hair that was hers, natural, unchanged, real. And yet, the voice in her head wasn't her voice anymore. It was Marcus's voice, the camp counselor's voice, her aunt's voice, the boy from 9th grade's voice. A chorus of corrections, all singing the same song. Wrong, wrong, you're doing it wrong. Her mother knocked on the bathroom door. You okay in there, baby? Yeah, Mama. Just getting ready for bed. But she wasn't. She was standing trial. Judge, jury, and defendant all at once, trying to figure out what crime her hair had committed by simply existing. The Pinterest board on her phone had 63 pins, sleek ponytails, bone-straight silk press results, Brazilian blowout transformations, before and after photos where the after always meant straighter, smoother, more like the girls in magazines and movies and music videos, more like what people called beautiful without having to think twice. She'd been collecting these images for months, little pieces of permission to change, to fix, to correct what was apparently broken. Each pin was a promise. Do this, and they'll stop. Do this, and you'll fit. Do this, and the jokes will turn into compliments. Kaliegh touched her hair gently, felt the texture between her fingers. Strong, resilient. Hair that could survive humidity and rain and wind without losing its integrity. Hair that didn't need chemicals to be what it was. But strength, she was learning, wasn't always celebrated. Sometimes it was punished. Her phone buzzed. A text from her cousin Shanice. You good? Heard about what happened at school. News traveled fast. Humiliation had witnesses, and witnesses had phones, and phones had group chats where your pain became content, became gossip, became just another story to share before someone posted a funny meme and everyone moved on. Kaliegh didn't respond. What would she say? That she was fine? That it didn't bother her? That she was strong enough to shake it off? She wasn't fine. It did bother her. And shaking it off was starting to feel like denying yourself oxygen. Possible for a minute, maybe two, but eventually your body demands what it needs. The next morning at school, she kept her head down, walked faster through hallways, avoided eye contact, wore a hoodie even though it was warm outside, pulling the hood up to cover as much as possible, making herself smaller, just like the world had taught her. In history class, Mrs. Patterson was teaching about the civil rights movement. Showed a photograph of the Little Rock Nine, those brave black students walking into a previously all-white school, surrounded by screaming crowds and National Guard troops. "Notice their composure, Mrs." Patterson said, pointing at the screen. "Notice their dignity in the face of hatred." Kaliegh looked at the photograph, looked at Elizabeth Eckford in her carefully pressed dress and sunglasses, walking through a mob of white people whose faces were twisted with rage. And she thought, but what did it cost her? What did it cost to maintain that composure? What did she do when she got home and closed the door and didn't have to be brave anymore? History books love to talk about dignity. They love to praise how people suffered beautifully, how they endured with grace. But they don't talk much about the toll, about the stomach aches and the sleepless nights and the way you start to question everything about yourself when the world keeps insisting you're the problem. At lunch, Kaliegh sat with her friends. They were talking about the usual things: who was dating who, what happened on last night's episode of their favorite show, plans for the weekend. Normal teenage conversation, safe topics. But then Jessica mentioned the spring formal. "We should all go together. It'll be so fun." The other girls started talking about dresses and hair appointments and which salon did the best updos. The conversation flowed easy, excited, full of that anticipation that comes with special events. Kaliegh stayed quiet. She was thinking about hair appointments, about sitting in a salon chair for 6 hours while someone pulled a hot comb through her hair. The smell of burning, the heat against her scalp, the careful warning: don't sweat, don't get it wet, don't let the rain touch it or all this work will be ruined. "What about you, Kaliegh?" Jessica asked. "You gonna get your hair done?" The table went quiet, just for a second. Just long enough for everyone to feel the weight of the question that wasn't really a question but a test. "Haven't decided yet," Kaliegh said, pushing food around her plate. "Girl, you should do a silk press. You'd look so pretty." The words came with a smile, meant as encouragement, meant as friendship. But what Kaliegh heard was, you'd look pretty if you changed. You'd be acceptable if you were different. You'd fit if you fixed yourself. She excused herself early, said she had to finish homework in the library. Another lie, another escape. She was getting good at those. The library was quiet. She found a corner desk and opened her laptop, but she didn't work on homework. She searched instead. Typed words into Google that felt dangerous and powerful at the same time. Natural hair discrimination, black hair workplace, school hair policies. The results came flooding in, stories upon stories. A black woman fired for wearing locks, a child sent home from school for having braids, professional dress codes that specifically targeted black hairstyles, court cases and news articles and personal testimonies that all said the same thing. This isn't new, this isn't rare, this is systematic. Kaliegh read about the Crown Act, legislation trying to protect people from discrimination based on hair texture and protective styles. She read comments from people saying it was unnecessary, that people should just follow professional standards, that it wasn't about race, it was about appearance. As if appearance and race could be separated. As if standards of professionalism hadn't been written by people who never had to think about whether their natural hair was acceptable. She closed the laptop, rested her head on her arms, felt the weight of it all pressing down. Not just Marcus's comment or her friend's well-meaning suggestions, but the whole structure of it. The way it was built into everything. The way you couldn't escape it by being good enough, or smart enough, or accomplished enough. The way it followed you from hallways to workplaces to courtrooms to everywhere you tried to exist. That evening, her father found her in her room, surrounded by YouTube videos of silk press tutorials. He sat on the edge of her bed, didn't say anything at first, just watched his daughter watching other people transform themselves. "You thinking about changing your hair?" he asked finally. Kaliegh paused the video. "I don't know. Maybe." "Why?" She wanted to tell him everything. About Marcus and the hallway and the laughter. About feeling like she was carrying something too heavy every time she left the house. About wanting just one day where she could exist without commentary, without correction, without being a walking debate about what was acceptable. But instead she said, "Just want to try something different." Her father nodded slowly. He'd heard that before. Heard it from his own mother, his sisters, his daughter. That careful language people use when they're really saying, "I'm tired of fighting. I just want peace." "You know what I see when I look at you," he said. "I see my daughter. Beautiful exactly as she is, hair and all." Kaliegh felt her throat tighten. "Easy for you to say. You don't have to deal with it." "You're right, I don't, and that's not fair." He paused. "But I need you to know something. Changing your hair won't change their ignorance. It'll just teach them that their ignorance works." He left the room quietly, left her alone with those words and the YouTube video still frozen on her screen. A before and after image. Before, natural curls. After, straight, shiny, acceptable. She thought about what her father said, about teaching people that their cruelty works, but she also thought about survival, about getting through each day without becoming a target, about the exhaustion of being strong all the time, of having to prove your worth constantly, of carrying dignity like a shield when all you wanted was to be a regular teenager worried about regular things. The mirror on her wall reflected her sitting there, laptop glowing, face uncertain. And for the first time, Kaliegh wondered if the mirror was lying. Not about how she looked, but about what looking like this was supposed to mean. Maybe the problem wasn't the reflection. Maybe the problem was who decided what reflections were acceptable in the first place. Monday morning came with that familiar dread. Kaliegh woke up 30 minutes earlier than usual, stood in front of her closet trying to make herself invisible. Navy blue sweater, safe. Black jeans, neutral. Hair pulled back tight in a low bun. Small, contained, less of a target. She was learning the mathematics of survival. Less volume equals less attention. Less attention equals less commentary. Less commentary equals less pain. Simple equation. Cruel calculus. Her mother noticed at breakfast. "You hiding today, baby?" "I'm just tired, Mama." Another lie. She wasn't tired. She was careful. There's a difference that people who've never had to measure themselves before leaving the house don't always understand. At school, she moved through the hallways like water finding the path of least resistance. Kept her eyes down. Responded when spoken to, smiled when expected. That smile, the one you learn to wear like armor, the one that says, "I'm fine, everything's fine, no problem here." The smile that costs more than people know. In second period, Mr. Davidson handed back essays. Kaliegh had written about code switching, how people modify their behavior, speech, and appearance to fit different social contexts. She'd gotten an A-. The comment at the bottom read, "Interesting topic, but perhaps a bit dramatic. Not sure this is as widespread as you suggest." She stared at those words. Felt something tighten in her chest. Here was a teacher, a white teacher, telling her that her lived experience was probably exaggerated, that what she knew to be true was perhaps a bit dramatic. The air changed, that heaviness again. But Kaliegh didn't argue, didn't raise her hand to explain, didn't point out the irony of being told she was wrong about code switching while literally code switching to make her argument more palatable to him. She just nodded, said, "Thank you for the feedback," and smiled. That required smile. The one that keeps you safe, the one that keeps you employed, the one that keeps you from being labeled as angry, aggressive, difficult, too much. At lunch, the conversation turned to college applications. Everyone was talking about personal statements, about what makes you unique, about standing out from the crowd. "You should write about your hair journey," Jessica said, meaning well. Always meaning well. Colleges love that diversity stuff. Kaliegh looked at her friend. Sweet girl, kind heart. Absolutely no idea that she'd just reduced years of pain and confusion and self-questioning to diversity stuff that could help with college admissions. "Maybe," Kaliegh said, and smiled. Her friend Tasha caught her eye across the table. Tasha knew. Black girl, locks down to her waist, had heard every variation of, "When are you gonna do something with that hair?" that existed. She gave Kaliegh a look that said, "I see you. I know what you're doing. I do it too." That moment of recognition. That silent understanding between black girls who've learned to navigate the same maze, who've learned when to speak and when to swallow, when to explain and when to just let it go because the cost of education is too high when you're the only lesson in the room. After school, Kaliegh had her shift at the grocery store. She worked as a cashier 3 days a week, saving money for college, for freedom, for the future where maybe things would be different. Her manager, Mrs. Patterson, different Mrs. Patterson from history class, no relation, called her into the office before her shift started. "Kaliegh, we need to talk about your appearance." The words landed like stones. "Here we go. Your hair needs to be more professional. Corporate policy states that employees should maintain a neat and tidy appearance. Perhaps you could pull it back more, or consider a different style." Kaliagh's hair was already pulled back, already neat, already contained, but she knew what Mrs. Patterson really meant. She meant, your natural hair, even when styled, reads as unprofessional. It reads as other. It reads as not fitting our image. "I understand," Kaliegh said, because what else could she say? She needed this job, needed the money, needed the reference for college applications. "I'm glad you understand. We just want to maintain standards, you know? Nothing personal." Nothing personal. As if policing someone's natural appearance wasn't deeply, fundamentally personal. Kaliegh went to the bathroom, pulled her hair even tighter, used more bobby pins, made herself even smaller, looked in the mirror and barely recognized the girl staring back. She thought about her history teacher's words about dignity in the face of hatred, about composure under pressure, about grace while suffering. But nobody talked about what that grace cost. Nobody mentioned the bathroom breaks where you cry silently. Nobody wrote about the nights you go home and scrub your face so hard trying to wash off the feeling of being constantly judged, constantly measured, constantly found lacking. During her shift, she smiled at every customer, thanked them for shopping here, wished them a nice day, made herself pleasant, palatable, professional. An elderly white woman came through her line, looked at Kaliagh's name tag, then at her face, then at her hair. "You speak English very well," the woman said. Kaliegh blinked. "Thank you, I was born here." "Oh, well, you're very articulate." There it was, that compliment that wasn't a compliment, that surprise that wasn't surprise but assumption, the subtle message that being black and articulate was unexpected, noteworthy, worthy of comment. "Thank you," Kaliegh said, and smiled. The woman left with her groceries, probably thinking she'd been kind, probably thinking she'd made that nice young girl's day with her encouragement, never knowing she'd just delivered another small cut, another reminder that even doing everything right, being polite, being professional, being articulate, still came with the qualifier of surprise. Kaliegh's co-worker, Michael, came over during their break. White guy, 20 years old, perpetually late, frequently on his phone during shifts. "Man, Mrs. Patterson is so annoying with these dress code things," he said. "She told me I couldn't wear my basketball jersey anymore. So stupid." Kaliegh nodded, but she thought, "Your basketball jersey is a choice. My hair is my biology. There's a difference between being asked to change your clothes and being asked to change your fundamental self." She didn't say this out loud. Instead, she said, "Yeah, she's strict about policy," and smiled. The shift ended at 9. Kaliegh walked to the bus stop, feet aching, face aching from smiling, soul aching from the weight of being constantly agreeable, constantly accommodating, constantly swallowing her truth to make other people comfortable. On the bus ride home, she watched her reflection in the dark window, saw the tired girl in the grocery store uniform, saw the careful hair, saw the practiced expression of pleasantness, and she wondered, how much of yourself can you give away before there's nothing authentic left? How many times can you smile through pain before you forget what genuine joy feels like? The bus stopped at her corner. She got off, walked the 2 blocks home, unlocked the door quietly. Her father was still up reading in the living room. He looked up when she came in. "Long day?" "Yeah," she said. Then, because she was tired of lying, They told me my hair isn't professional enough. Her father's jaw tightened. Your hair is fine. Your hair is beautiful. Your hair is yours. Kaliegh felt the tears coming. Then why does it always feel like I'm wrong? He stood up, pulled her into a hug. Because they've spent centuries building a world where you'd believe that. And baby, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you have to carry this. She cried into his shoulder. Not loud, not dramatic. Just that quiet kind of crying that comes from exhaustion, from carrying too much for too long. Some wounds don't make noise. They just accumulate. Layer upon layer of small cuts, tiny dismissals, subtle degradations, until one day you realize you've been bleeding for years and you've gotten so good at hiding it that even you sometimes forget it's happening. But it is. It always is. The salon appointment was scheduled for Saturday morning. Kaliegh had saved up 3 weeks of paychecks for this. $180 for a silk press that would last maybe 2 weeks if she was careful. If she didn't sweat, if she avoided rain, if she slept with a silk bonnet and didn't move too much in her sleep. $180 to look acceptable. $180 to fit the standard. $180 to buy temporary peace. Her mother drove her there in silence. They both knew what this was. Not a beauty treatment, not a fun girl's day. This was surrender dressed up as a choice. The salon smelled like chemicals and hot iron and bergamot oil. 4 other women sat in chairs, all black, all in various stages of straightening. The ritual was familiar, passed down through generations like a religion nobody questioned anymore. You want it bone straight? The stylist asked, running her fingers through Kaliegh's natural hair. Yes, please. It's gonna take a minute. Your hair is thick. That's good hair, though. Strong. Good hair. The phrase made Kalieg's stomach turn. As if some hair was good and other hair was bad. As if texture could determine worth. The process took 5 hours. Washing, blow-drying, flat iron at 450 degrees, passing through each section multiple times. The smell of her hair burning at the ends. The heat against her scalp. The careful warning, let me know if it's too hot. But what's too hot when the world demands this? What's too hot when the alternative is being called Brillo pad in public hallways? What's too hot when your manager says your natural hair isn't professional? Kaliegh watched in the mirror as her hair transformed, tight coils becoming sleek, straight strands, volume disappearing, texture erased, her silhouette changing into something more familiar, more acceptable, more like what magazines said beauty should look like. The stylist smiled. Look at that, you're gorgeous. Your boyfriend's gonna love it. Kaliegh didn't have a boyfriend. Didn't want one right now. But that wasn't the point. The point was that her worth was being measured by male approval, by conventional attractiveness, by how well she could approximate a standard that was never built with her in mind. Thank you, she said, paid the $180 plus tip, left the salon with instructions. No water, no humidity, no exercise, no hats, no tight ponytails. A list of restrictions that came with the new look. She felt lighter physically. Straight hair always weighs less than natural volume, but heavier in every other way, like she'd traded one burden for another. At home, her little sister Amara was watching TV. 8 years old, hair in 2 puffs, face still round with childhood innocence. Whoa, your hair looks so different. Amara touched it gently. I like it. Thanks, baby girl. Are you gonna keep it like that? Kaliegh looked at her sister, looked at those puffs that nobody had criticized yet, that hadn't been called kitchen-like or nappy or unprofessional. Looked at the child who still thought her own hair was beautiful, because nobody had told her different. Not yet. For a little while, Kaliegh said. That night she scrolled through Instagram, posted a selfie with the new hair. The likes came flooding in. Comments filled with fire emojis and heart eyes and yas girl and you should keep it like this. More validation for straight hair in 20 minutes than she'd ever gotten for her natural hair in 16 years. The message was clear, loud, undeniable. Sunday morning, she went to church with her family. The compliments came immediately. Sister Johnson, Mother Williams, Deacon Brown, all of them praising her new look. "Oh, honey, you look so beautiful, so polished, so put together." As if she wasn't polished before, as if her natural hair meant she wasn't put together. Only one person said anything different. Mother Green, oldest member of the congregation, woman who'd marched with Dr. King and lived through the civil rights era and still wore her gray hair in a natural afro. She pulled Kaliegh aside after service. "Your hair looks nice, baby, but it looked nice before too, don't forget that." Kaliegh felt something crack inside, that validation she didn't know she needed. That permission to remember who she was before she tried to become who they wanted. Monday at school, the transformation continued. People who barely spoke to her before suddenly stopped to compliment her. Boys who'd ignored her were suddenly interested. Teachers who'd been neutral were suddenly warm. Marcus, the same Marcus who'd called her hair a Brillo pad, stopped her in the hallway. "Yo, Kaliegh, your hair looks good like that. You should keep it straight." She stared at him. This boy who'd humiliated her. This boy whose comment had sent her spiraling into self-doubt. This boy who was now offering approval because she'd conformed. The air changed. That familiar heaviness. "Thanks," she heard herself say. Automatic, conditioned. The required response to male attention, even when it came from someone who'd hurt you. He walked away, smiling, probably thinking he'd complimented her. Probably not understanding that his words were just another form of control. In history class, they were learning about the 1960s. Mrs. Patterson showed pictures of Black Power activists with afros, of Angela Davis with her iconic crown of natural hair. "Notice how they used their appearance as a political statement," Mrs. Patterson said. The afro became a symbol of pride and resistance. Kaliegh touched her straight hair, wondered what it said about her, what statement she was making, what resistance she was surrendering. After school, Tasha found her by her locker. "So you did it," Tasha said. No judgment in her voice, just recognition. "Yeah." "How you feeling?" Kaliegh thought about it. Really thought about it. "I feel safe, and I hate that I feel safe." Tasha nodded. She understood. The paradox of protective styling, not protective from weather or damage, but protective from judgment, from commentary, from the constant assault of other people's opinions. "It's temporary," Tasha said. "The hair will go back. The question is whether you will." That night, Kaliegh lay in bed with her silk bonnet on, careful not to sweat, careful not to mess up her $180 investment. She thought about Tasha's words, about going back, about who she was versus who she was becoming. The compliments had felt good, the attention had felt validating, the relief from constant criticism had felt like freedom. But was it freedom if it required constant maintenance? Was it peace if it came with a list of restrictions? Was it acceptance if she had to change everything about herself to receive it? She pulled out her phone, scrolled through her Pinterest board again, but this time she didn't look at the silk press tutorials. This time she searched for something different. Natural hair pride. Black hair beauty. Afro confidence. The images filled her screen. Women with locks and twist-outs and afros and braids. Women who looked like her, hair like hers, existing unapologetically in their natural state. And for the first time in weeks, Kaliegh felt something shift. Not a decision yet, not a plan. Just a small crack in the wall she'd been building around herself. Just a whisper that said, maybe there's another way. She fell asleep with that thought. Woke up the next morning with her straight hair still perfect, still acceptable, still drawing compliments. But inside, in that quiet place where real change begins, something was growing. Something they hadn't counted on when they made their jokes and gave their advice and offered their casual cruelty. Something stubborn, something strong, something that remembered what she looked like before she learned to be ashamed. The standard had become a prison, and Kaliegh was starting to notice the bars. The rain came on a Thursday. Not a drizzle you could avoid, but a downpour that caught everyone off guard during lunch period. Students ran for cover, laughing and screaming, textbooks held over heads. Kaliegh stood frozen in the courtyard, felt the first drops hit her straightened hair, felt panic rise in her throat, All that money, all that time, all that heat and pain and careful sleeping, about to be undone by water falling from the sky. She ran for the building, but it was too late. By the time she reached the door, her hair was wet. She could feel it already. The reversion starting, the straight strands beginning to coil again, fighting their way back to their natural state. In the bathroom, she stood in front of the mirror, watching the transformation happen in reverse. The sleek curtain becoming textured, the smooth edges becoming kinky. Her $180 silk press dissolving into exactly what she'd paid to hide. Other girls came in, shaking off rain, fixing their makeup, laughing about the sudden storm. One of them looked at Kaliegh. "Oh no, your hair!" The sympathy felt like pity. The concern felt like confirmation that this was indeed a disaster. But as Kaliegh stood there watching her natural texture emerge, something unexpected happened. Instead of shame, she felt relief. The performance was over. The mask was coming off. She didn't have to be careful anymore. She touched her damp hair, felt the coils reforming under her fingers, felt the resilience of it, the way it insisted on being itself no matter how much heat you applied, how many chemicals you used, how desperately you tried to make it something else. Tasha came into the bathroom, saw Kaliegh standing there, saw her hair reverting, saw the expression on her face. "You okay?" Kaliegh looked at her reflection, at the girl caught between two versions of herself, at the choice presenting itself right there in that school bathroom, rain drumming on the roof, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. "I think so," she said, and meant it. The rest of the day she walked through school with her hair in transition. Not straight, not fully natural, just real, authentic, caught in the act of being itself despite everything that had tried to change it. Some people stared, some people whispered, but this time, Kaliegh didn't shrink, didn't apologize, didn't try to explain or fix or make herself smaller. She just existed. That night she washed her hair completely, let the water run through it, watched the last remnants of the silk press disappear down the drain, used her natural hair products, the ones she'd hidden in the back of the cabinet, the ones she'd been embarrassed to let people see. Deep conditioner, leave-in, curl cream. The ritual of caring for hair that didn't need to be changed, just nurtured. Her mother came to the bathroom door, watched her daughter working product through her coils with gentle fingers. "You letting it go back?" "Yeah." Her mother didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "You know, I wore my hair natural when I was young. Before I started working corporate jobs, before I learned all the rules about what was acceptable." Kaliegh looked up. "What made you change it?" "Fear, baby. Fear of not getting hired, fear of not getting promoted, fear of being seen as radical or unprofessional or too black." She paused, and maybe I was right to be afraid. Maybe those fears were justified. But I also wonder what I lost when I decided my hair was the problem instead of the people judging it. It was the most honest her mother had been about this, the most vulnerable. The admission that code switching and conforming came with a cost, even when it felt necessary. "I'm tired of being afraid," Kaliegh said softly. "I know. I see it in you. That tiredness that comes from trying to be acceptable." Her mother touched her daughter's wet hair gently. "Whatever you decide, I support you. But baby, make sure you're deciding for yourself, not for them." After her mother left, Kaliegh sat on the edge of the tub and thought about that, about who she was making decisions for, about whose comfort she'd been centering, about whose approval she'd been seeking. She thought about Marcus's compliment when her hair was straight, about her manager's subtle pressure to look more professional, about the Instagram likes and the church praise and the validation that came with conforming. And she thought about Mother Green's words. "It looked nice before, too, don't forget that." The decision formed slowly, not dramatic, not announced. Just a quiet knowing that settled in her chest like a stone finding its resting place. She was done performing. Friday morning, Kaliegh showed up to school with her hair in a twist out. Full, voluminous, unapologetically natural. She'd spent an hour the night before twisting it, then carefully unraveling each twist that morning, watching her hair spring into defined coils that caught the light. The stares came immediately. She felt them like touches against her skin, felt the questions forming in people's minds, felt the judgment activating. But she kept walking, head up, back straight, breathing steady. In first period, a girl whispered to her friend, just loud enough for Kaliegh to hear, "I liked it better straight." The air changed, that old familiar heaviness. But this time, Kaliegh didn't let it settle in her chest. She acknowledged it, felt it, recognized it, then let it pass through her instead of taking root. At lunch, Marcus saw her, did a double take, opened his mouth like he was going to say something. Kaliegh looked him dead in the eye, waited. He closed his mouth, looked away, kept walking. That moment, that small moment of him choosing silence instead of commentary, felt like victory. Not because he'd learned anything, probably, but because Kaliegh had learned something, had learned that his opinion didn't have to define her reality. Tasha slid into the seat across from her at lunch, a huge smile on her face. "Look at you." "Look at me," Kaliegh echoed. "How you feeling?" "Scared." "Relieved, exposed, free, all of it." "Yeah," Tasha said, understanding immediately. "That sounds about right." They sat together, two black girls with natural hair in a cafeteria full of opinions and standards and unspoken rules. Two girls deciding that their existence didn't require permission. After school, Kaliegh went to work. Walked into that grocery store with her twist out still full, still visible, still making a statement whether she intended to or not. Mrs. Patterson saw her. Kaliegh watched the manager's face, saw the disapproval forming, saw the corporate policy speech preparing itself. But before Mrs. Patterson could say anything, Kaliegh spoke first. "I know what you're going to say about my hair, but this is my natural hair, clean and styled. If there's a specific policy that prohibits natural black hairstyles, I'd like to see it in writing, and if necessary, I can contact the EEOC about workplace discrimination." The words came out steady, calm, not aggressive, just clear, setting a boundary, demanding respect. Mrs. Patterson blinked. I suppose if it's neat." "It is neat, it's just not straight." The manager nodded slowly. "Right. Well, okay then." She walked away, and Kaliegh stood there, hands shaking slightly, heart pounding, realizing what she'd just done. She'd stood up. She'd pushed back. She'd refused to shrink. And nothing terrible had happened. The sky didn't fall. She didn't get fired. The world didn't end. That night, Kaliegh took a selfie. Hair full and natural, face calm, eyes clear. She posted it with a simple caption. "This is me." No explanation, no apology, no justification. Just existence, just presence, just truth. The likes came slower than they had for her silk press photo. The comments were more mixed. Some people loved it. Some people offered unwanted advice. Some people said nothing at all. But Kaliegh wasn't checking for validation anymore. Wasn't waiting for approval. Wasn't measuring her worth by how many people accepted her performance. She was just being. And that, she was learning, was its own kind of revolution. Small, personal, quiet. But revolution nonetheless. Because when you spend your whole life being told to change, simply staying the same becomes an act of resistance. Simply existing as yourself becomes a threat to the system that profits from your self-doubt. Kaliegh put her phone away, looked in the mirror one last time before bed, saw herself, really saw herself, maybe for the first time in months. And she smiled. Not the required smile, not the accommodating smile, not the smile that kept her safe. Just a real smile. For herself. Because she liked what she saw. That's when real change begins. Not in the big moments or the grand gestures, but in the quiet decision to stop apologizing for taking up space. In the simple act of choosing yourself. The flyer appeared on the bulletin board outside the cafeteria on a Tuesday. Bright pink paper, elegant script, impossible to miss. Spring Beauty Pageant, Celebrating excellence, grace, and beauty. Applications due in 2 weeks. Open to all junior and senior girls. Winner receives a $2,000 scholarship and represents the school at regional competitions. Kaliegh stood in front of that flyer for a full minute, read it 3 times, felt something stirring in her chest, something dangerous, something bold, something that felt like possibility mixed with defiance. Tasha came up beside her. "You thinking what I think you're thinking?" "Probably not. You're thinking about entering." Kaliegh turned to her friend. "Am I crazy?" "Probably," Tasha said, grinning. "But the good kind of crazy, the necessary kind." The history of Jefferson High's beauty pageant was well established. 23 years running, 23 winners, all of them fitting a very specific mold. Long hair, conventional features, the kind of beauty that required no explanation, no adjustment, no getting used to. Not a single black girl had ever won. 3 had tried over the years. None made it past preliminaries. The message was clear without being spoken. This space wasn't built for girls who looked like Kaliegh. This crown wasn't meant for heads that carried natural hair like hers. But that's exactly why she wanted it. At dinner that night, Kaliegh mentioned the pageant casually, like it was just another school activity she might consider. Her father looked up from his plate. "The beauty pageant? Yeah. You know the history of that thing?" "I do." He studied her face, saw something there he recognized, that same stubborn determination he'd seen in his own mother, his sisters, every black woman who'd ever decided that closed doors were just suggestions. "Then you know what you're walking into." "I know." Her mother set down her fork. "Baby, I support whatever you decide, but I need you to be prepared. Those judges, they have a very specific idea of what beauty looks like, and it usually doesn't look like us." "I know that too, Mama." "So why put yourself through it?" Kaliegh thought about that question. Why enter a competition designed to exclude you? Why walk into a space that historically rejected people who looked like you? "Because someone has to," she said finally. "Because if nobody challenges it, it never changes. Because I'm tired of letting other people decide what spaces I'm allowed to occupy." The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't disapproval. It was recognition, understanding, the knowledge that sometimes you have to do hard things not because they're easy, but because they're necessary. Her little sister Amara spoke up, voice small but clear. "I think you should do it. I think you'd be the prettiest one there." Kaliegh felt her throat tighten, looked at her baby sister with those puffs still intact, that confidence still unbroken. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about what Amara would see, what she would learn, what she would believe was possible. The application was simple: name, grade, GPA, extracurriculars. One essay question: what does beauty mean to you? Kaliegh sat at her desk that night, cursor blinking on a blank document. What does beauty mean to you? She thought about all the ways she'd been taught beauty. Magazine covers and movie stars and music videos. Straight hair and light skin and features that approximated European standards. Beauty is something you achieved through product, through effort, through transformation. Beauty is something you weren't but could become if you tried hard enough. But she also thought about Mother Green at church with her gray afro, about her grandmother's hands worn and strong from decades of work, about Tasha's locks catching sunlight, about her own reflection when she stopped trying to change it and just looked. She started typing. Beauty is what remains when you stop performing. It's the courage to exist as yourself in spaces that expect you to be someone else. It's my grandmother's face, my mother's strength, my sister's laughter. It's the hair that grows from my scalp without apology. Beauty is resistance. Beauty is presence. Beauty is refusing to disappear. She submitted the application before she could second-guess herself. 2 days later, she got the email. She'd been selected as one of 15 finalists. The preliminary meeting was held in the auditorium after school. Kaliegh walked in and immediately felt it. That shift in the air, that sudden awareness, that moment when everyone notices you're not like them. 14 other girls sat in the front rows. Long, straight hair in ponytails or loose waves, sundresses and sandals, easy smiles and comfortable laughter. They belonged here. This space was built for them. Kaliegh, with her twist-out pinned up, her simple jeans and t-shirt, was clearly the disruption. The pageant coordinator, Mrs. Whitmore, stood at the podium. White woman, 50s, perfectly highlighted hair, pearl necklace. She smiled when she saw the girls, but the smile flickered slightly when her eyes landed on Kaliegh. Quick recovery, professional. But Kaliegh saw it, that momentary hesitation, that silent question mark. "Welcome, ladies. I'm so excited about this year's group. You all look absolutely lovely." The meeting covered logistics, interview questions, evening gown requirements, talent portion, community service component. Mrs. Whitmore spoke about grace, poise, representing the school with dignity. "Now about hair and makeup," she said, and Kaliegh felt every nerve in her body activate. "We'll have professionals available on pageant day. We want you looking your absolute best. Polished, put together, camera ready." One of the girls raised her hand. "Will they do everyone's hair?" "Of course. We want consistency, elegance, a cohesive look that represents Jefferson High's standards of excellence." Kaliegh raised her hand. Mrs. Whitmore's smile tightened slightly. "Yes, Kaliegh? What if someone wants to wear their natural hair?" The room went quiet. That loaded kind of quiet where everyone suddenly becomes very interested in their shoes. "Well, of course we want you to look natural, but professional natural, polished natural. I mean my natural hair texture, not straightened." Mrs. Whitmore blinked. Well, that's certainly your choice, but you'll want to make sure it's neat, contained, appropriate for a formal event." There it was, the coded language, the subtle message that natural black hair, no matter how well styled, read as less than, as unprofessional, as inappropriate for spaces that demanded a certain aesthetic. Kaliegh felt the old familiar weight settling in her chest, the pressure to conform, to make herself acceptable, to shrink into something that wouldn't make people uncomfortable. But she also felt something else, something newer, stronger, the same stubborn determination that had made her apply in the first place. "My hair will be neat and styled," Kaliegh said calmly. "It'll just be natural." "Of course," Mrs. Whitmore said quickly. "We celebrate all types of beauty here." The lie hung in the air. 23 years of winners, all with the same type of hair, all fitting the same mold. But sure, all types of beauty. After the meeting, Kaliegh walked out alone. The other girls had clustered in groups, already forming alliances, already comfortable in their belonging. She heard whispers as she passed, not loud, but present. "Do you think she'll actually wear it like that? She seems nice, but... it's her choice, but..." Tasha was waiting outside, leaning against the wall. "How'd it go?" "About how you'd expect. They try to talk you out of your hair? Not directly, just subtly, professionally, with lots of coded language about polish and professionalism. You gonna let them?" Kaliegh looked back at the auditorium doors, at the space that clearly wasn't built for her, at the competition designed around standards she'd never fit. "No," she said, "I'm not." "Good," Tasha said, "because baby girl, they need to see you. They need to remember that beauty doesn't have just one face. And if you don't show them, who will?" Walking home that afternoon, Kaliegh felt the weight of what she'd committed to. This wasn't just entering a pageant. This was stepping into territory that had historically excluded her. This was making herself visible in a space that preferred her invisible. This was claiming a crown that had never been meant for her head. But maybe that's exactly why it mattered. Maybe that's exactly why she had to try. Because closed doors don't open themselves. Because standards don't change without being challenged. Because little girls like Amara needed to see someone who looked like them refusing to accept limitations. The space wasn't built for her, but she was going to occupy it anyway. And that, right there, was its own kind of beautiful. The weeks before the pageant moved fast. Too fast. Kaliegh found herself caught between regular life, school, work, homework, and this new reality she'd created for herself. Every spare moment became preparation. Not just for the pageant itself, but for the battle she knew was coming. She practiced her interview answers in the mirror, researched past winners, studied their responses, analyzed what the judges seemed to value: poise, confidence, articulateness that somehow always came with a note of surprise when it came from black girls. "You're very well spoken," they'd say, like it was unexpected. Like being black and intelligent were contradictory traits. Kaliegh prepared for that too. Prepared for the microaggressions that would come dressed as compliments. Prepared for the coded language, the subtle dismissals, the ways people could make you feel less than without ever saying it directly. Tasha helped her shop for an evening gown. They went to 3 different stores before finding one that felt right. A deep emerald dress that made her skin glow, that didn't require her to shrink or hide or minimize herself. In the dressing room, Kaliegh stood in front of the mirror. The dress fit perfectly, but she could already hear the voices. "It's a bit much, don't you think? Maybe something more subtle. You don't want to stand out for the wrong reasons. Because God forbid a black girl be bold. God forbid she take up space. God forbid she refuse to make herself smaller for other people's comfort." "You look amazing," Tasha said firmly. "Don't let anybody tell you different." The talent portion was another challenge. Kaliegh had chosen spoken word poetry, a piece she'd written about identity, about the weight of carrying other people's expectations, about learning to exist unapologetically. She practiced it every night, in her room, in the bathroom, walking to school. Let the words sink into her bones until they felt less like performance and more like truth. Her father listened one evening, standing in her doorway while she rehearsed. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "That's powerful, baby girl. You think it's too much, too political?" "I think it's honest, and honesty makes people uncomfortable. But that's their problem, not yours." He paused, then added, "You know they might not be ready for that, for you, for what you're saying. I know. You doing it anyway?" "I am." He smiled. Pride mixed with concern. "That's my daughter." At school, the other pageant contestants formed a tight circle. They practiced together, shared tips, supported each other. Kaliegh was invited to join exactly once. She showed up to their after-school practice session in the drama room. The conversation stopped when she walked in. Not dramatically. Just that subtle shift, that brief pause before everyone started talking again a little too deliberately. Jessica was there, trying to bridge the gap. "Hey, Kaliegh. We were just working on our walks. Want to practice with us?" "Sure." They lined up, took turns walking across the room in their heels, practicing that pageant glide. Smooth, confident, head up, shoulders back. When it was Kaliegh's turn, she felt every eye on her. Felt them watching not just her walk, but her hair, her dress, her entire presence. Measuring her against some invisible standard. She walked anyway, head high, steady, refusing to shrink. "That was good," one girl said, voice neutral. "Very confident." The word hung there, confident, which could mean self-assured or could mean aggressive or could mean uppity, all depending on who was saying it and who they were saying it about. Kaliegh smiled. "Thank you." She didn't go back to their practice sessions, practiced alone instead, in her room, with only her reflection as audience. Better to prepare in isolation than to shrink yourself trying to fit in. The weekend before the pageant, her mother took her to get her hair done. Not straightened this time. Styled in its natural state, a beautiful twist-out that would be pinned into an elegant updo on pageant day. The stylist, a black woman named Angela, understood the assignment immediately. "You doing the pageant, huh?" "Yes, ma'am. Natural hair and all." "Natural hair and all." Angela smiled. "Baby, I'm about to make you so stunning they won't have any choice but to see you." She worked for 2 hours. Careful, deliberate, creating something that was both elegant and authentically Kaliegh. Something that said, "This is beautiful exactly as it is." When she finished, Kaliegh looked in the mirror and felt something shift. Not transformation, recognition. She looked like herself, just elevated, still natural, still real, still unapologetic. "You wear this with your head up. Angela said. You walk in there knowing you belong because you do. And if they can't see that, that's their blindness, not your inadequacy. At home, Kaliegh hung the emerald dress in her closet, placed her heels beneath it, set out her jewelry. Everything ready, everything prepared. But the real preparation was internal. It was the mental fortitude she was building, the armor she was constructing, the decision she was making every single day to not let their discomfort become her shame. Her little sister came into her room that night, climbed up on the bed where Kaliegh was reviewing her interview notes. Are you nervous? Amara asked. Terrified. But you're still doing it? Yeah. Why? Kaliegh thought about how to explain it, how to tell an 8-year-old about systemic exclusion, about beauty standards built on racism, about the importance of taking up space in places that try to push you out. Because I want you to know you can, she said finally. I want you to grow up seeing that doors that seem closed aren't really closed. They're just waiting for someone brave enough to push them open. You're brave, Kaliegh. I'm scared, baby girl, but I'm doing it anyway. That's what brave really means. Amara hugged her. I hope you win. Me too, Kaliegh whispered. Me too. But winning, she was learning, wasn't just about the crown. It was about refusing to disappear. It was about existing fully in spaces that expected partial presence at best. It was about the girls who would come after her, who would see what she did and know they could do it too. The night before the pageant, Kaliegh couldn't sleep, lay in bed running through every possible scenario. The interview questions, the walk, the talent portion, the moment when they announced the winner and it inevitably wasn't her. Because let's be real, 23 years of history didn't change overnight. Systems didn't dismantle themselves just because one girl decided to challenge them. But systems did crack. Slowly, painfully, through the accumulated pressure of people who refused to accept that things had to stay the same. She got up, went to the bathroom, looked at herself in the mirror, practiced her smile. Not the accommodating smile, not the smile that made other people comfortable, but the smile that said, I know my worth, and your inability to see it doesn't diminish it. Tomorrow she would walk into that auditorium. Tomorrow she would stand on that stage. Tomorrow she would present herself, natural hair, bold dress, honest talent, to judges who might not be ready to see beauty in her form. But she would do it anyway. Not because she expected fairness, but because her presence itself was a form of resistance. Because visibility was a kind of victory. Because somewhere, some little black girl who looked like her needed to see someone refuse to be invisible. The preparation was complete. The dress was ready, the hair was planned, the words were memorized. But the most important preparation had nothing to do with any of that. It was the internal decision that no matter what happened tomorrow, she would walk out of that auditorium with her dignity intact. They could control the crown, but they couldn't control her worth. And that understanding, that deep, unshakable knowing, was the only preparation that really mattered. The auditorium was packed. Parents, students, teachers, community members, all gathered for Jefferson High's 24th annual spring beauty pageant. The air hummed with anticipation and the smell of hairspray and expensive perfume. Backstage, 15 girls moved in controlled chaos. Last-minute makeup adjustments, dress checks, nervous laughter that was more anxiety than joy. Kaliegh stood in front of a mirror in the corner, away from the others. Her hands were steady as she fastened her earrings, but her heart was racing. The emerald dress fit perfectly. Her hair, pinned into an elegant updo with her natural coils visible and intentional, looked exactly as planned. She looked beautiful. She knew she looked beautiful. But beautiful according to whom? That was the question hanging in the air. 5 minutes, the stage manager called out. Jessica came over, face flushed with excitement. Oh my God, I'm so nervous. Are you nervous? Yeah, Kaliegh said honestly. You look really pretty, Jessica added, and she meant it. But there was something in her voice, surprise maybe, as if she'd expected otherwise. Thanks. So do you. The curtain went up. The pageant began. One by one, the contestants were introduced. Each girl walked across the stage in her evening gown, posed, smiled, waved. The audience applauded politely for each one. Then they called Kaleigh's name. She stepped into the spotlight, felt the heat of it on her skin, heard the subtle shift in the audience, that moment of recognition, of seeing something they hadn't expected. She walked, steady, confident, head up. The emerald dress caught the light with every step. Her natural hair, styled but not straightened, crowned her head like it belonged there. Because it did. The applause came, not overwhelming but present. She could hear her family, her father's loud clapping, Amara's excited squeal, her mother's supportive whoops. But she could also feel the hesitation in the room, the judgment being formed, the silent questions about whether this was appropriate, whether she fit, whether natural hair belonged on a pageant stage. She posed at center stage. She smiled. Not the accommodating smile, but the real one. The one that said, "I'm here, I'm not apologizing, get used to it." Then she walked off, and the next contestant was introduced. Backstage, she exhaled. First part done. The interview portion was next. Each contestant sat with 3 judges in a private room, answering questions designed to reveal their character, intelligence, and values. When it was Kalieigh's turn, she sat down across from the panel. 2 women, 1 man, all white, all middle-aged, all looking at her with expressions that tried to be neutral but carried weight. "Tell us about yourself, Kaliegh," the first judge said. She delivered her prepared answer, talked about her academics, her work at the grocery store, her goals for college. Professional, articulate, everything they claim to want. "Very impressive," the second judge said. "You're very well spoken." There it was, right on schedule. "Thank you," Kaliegh said, keeping her voice even, refusing to let the coded compliment shake her. "Now, this pageant is about representing our school. What do you think that means?" Kaliegh looked at the judge who'd asked the question, saw the real question beneath it. "Can you represent us when you look like that?" "I think it means bringing your whole self," she said carefully. "Not just the parts that are easy or comfortable. It means showing that excellence comes in different forms, that beauty has many faces, that representation means actually representing the diversity of who we are." The room went quiet. The judges exchanged glances. "That's an interesting perspective," the third judge said. Interesting. Another loaded word. Could mean thoughtful, could mean problematic, could mean we weren't expecting you to challenge us. The interview continued. More questions, more careful answers, more moments where Kaliegh felt herself being measured against a standard she'd never quite fit. But she held her ground, answered honestly, refused to shrink. When she left that room, she felt drained. Not because she'd done poorly, she'd done well, she knew she had, but because even doing well required so much more effort when you were also fighting against assumptions. The talent portion was last. Girls sang, danced, played piano. Each performance was met with enthusiastic applause. Then came Kalieigh's turn. She walked onto the stage in simple black clothing. No dress, no elaborate costume. Just her and her words and the truth she was about to speak. The audience quieted, waiting. She began. "They tell you to change before you even know what you are. Tell you to fix what they decided was broken. Tell you to apologize for taking up space, for being loud, for being different, for being exactly what you were born to be." Her voice was steady, strong. The words she'd practiced 100 times now flowing like water. "They say it's a preference, not prejudice. Say it's professional standards, not racism. Say it's about being polished, not about erasing who you are. But when the standard only fits one face, one texture, one definition of beautiful, what do you call that?" She could feel the tension in the room. Some people shifting uncomfortably, others leaning forward, listening intently. "I call it what it is. A system that profits from your shame. A machine that runs on self-doubt. A structure built on the idea that some people are born acceptable and others have to earn it by changing everything about themselves." The silence was absolute now, heavy, loaded. But I'm done changing, done shrinking, done apologizing for existing in my natural state. This hair, she touched her updo, grows from my head. This skin covers my body. This voice speaks my truth, and none of it needs permission to be beautiful. She paused. Let the words settle. So when they ask what beauty means to me, I say, it's the courage to exist as yourself in a world that constantly suggests you shouldn't. It's resistance, it's presence, it's refusing to disappear. She finished, stood there for a moment in the spotlight, vulnerable, exposed, having said things that couldn't be unsaid. The applause started slow. Her family first, loud and proud. Then spreading, some people genuinely moved, some people supportive, some people clapping politely because that's what you do. But there was also silence, pockets of it. People who didn't clap, people who sat with their arms crossed, people whose expressions said, "This isn't what we came here for." Kaliegh walked off stage. Her hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from the release of having finally said what needed to be said. Tasha was waiting in the wings, grabbed her in a fierce hug. "That was everything," she whispered. "That was perfect." The deliberation took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of contestants pacing backstage, reapplying lipstick, holding hands, hoping. Kaliegh stood alone, not because she wanted to, but because her presence seemed to make the others uncomfortable. The girl who'd said too much, who'd made it political, who'd reminded everyone that this competition, like everything else, existed within a system that hadn't been built fairly. Finally, they were called back on stage. All 15 contestants lined up, hands clasped, smiles plastered on despite the nerves. Mrs. Whitmore took the microphone, gave the usual speech about how difficult the decision was, how talented all the girls were, how proud they should all be. Then came the moment. Your Jefferson High Spring Beauty Pageant winner is... Kaliegh felt her whole body tense. She didn't let herself hope. Couldn't afford to. 23 years of history told her how this ended. Kaliegh Garris. The words didn't register at first. Couldn't register. Made no sense. But then the spotlight hit her. The audience erupted, some in genuine celebration, some in shocked applause, some in supportive recognition of what this meant. Kaliegh stood frozen. Her family was screaming. Tasha was crying. Amara was jumping up and down. The crown was placed on her head, on top of her natural hair. The hair that was supposed to be wrong, unprofessional, not beautiful enough. But here she was, crowned, visible, undeniable. She looked out at the audience, saw faces that were happy, faces that were confused, faces that were clearly displeased. Saw the complexity of this moment. Not pure victory, not complete acceptance, but something messy and real and meaningful. She'd won. But more than that, she'd existed fully. She'd refused to disappear. She'd stood on that stage as herself and demanded to be seen. And they'd had no choice but to see her. The silence that had surrounded her natural hair, that had suggested it didn't belong, that had tried to make her ashamed. That silence broke. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough for one little black girl in the audience to see her sister crowned. Enough for Tasha to know her fight wasn't solitary. Enough for other girls to imagine themselves in spaces they'd been told weren't for them. Kaliegh smiled. The real smile, the one that came from deep inside, from that place where she'd decided she was enough exactly as she was. And for the first time in a long time, she believed it. The Monday after the pageant arrived like any other Monday. Same hallways, same lockers, same fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. But everything felt different. Kaliegh walked through the school doors wearing the same clothes she always wore, hair in a simple puff, backpack over one shoulder. But now she carried something else too, the weight of visibility, the burden of being a symbol, the complex reality of having won something that meant more than a crown. The stares were immediate, some admiring, some curious, some openly hostile. She felt them like physical touches against her skin. There she is, someone whispered. Can't believe she actually won. I mean, good for her, I guess. That last one, I guess, said everything. The reluctant acceptance, the conditional approval, the suggestion that her victory was unexpected, unearned, possibly unfair. At her locker, she found a note taped to the door. Anonymous, handwritten in angry capitals. Affirmative action pageant queen. The words hit like a slap, the implication clear. She hadn't won on merit, but on some quota, some diversity checkbox, some need to appear progressive. Never mind her interview answers. Never mind her talent performance. Never mind that she'd stood on that stage and delivered exactly what they claimed to want. Confidence, intelligence, authenticity. None of that mattered to whoever wrote this note. To them, she could only win through charity, not excellence. Kaliegh crumpled the paper, threw it in the trash, kept walking. But the message stayed, settled in her chest like a stone. In first period, her English teacher made an announcement. Congratulations to Kaliegh Garris, our pageant winner. We're so proud. Polite applause, some genuine smiles, but also silence from certain corners. Arms crossed, eyes rolling. The clear message, we don't celebrate this. Marcus was in that class, the same Marcus who'd called her hair a Brillo pad months ago. He didn't clap, just stared at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Confusion, maybe, or resentment that the girl he'd mocked was now crowned. After class, he approached her in the hallway. Yo, congrats, I guess. Thanks, Kaliegh said carefully. Didn't think you'd actually win. Thought they'd go with someone more, you know. More what? He shrugged. Traditional. There it was, that word, traditional, which really meant white, which really meant acceptable according to historical standards, which really meant someone not like you. Well, I won, Kaliegh said flatly. Yeah, you did. He walked away, leaving her standing there feeling both victorious and exhausted. At lunch, the usual table felt different. Her friends congratulated her, but there was something underneath. A distance, a subtle shift in dynamic. Must feel amazing, Jessica said. You made history. It feels complicated, Kaliegh admitted. What do you mean, you won? How could she explain it? That winning while black came with asterisks. That every achievement was questioned, scrutinized, attributed to anything but merit. That even victory felt like she had to defend it, justify it, prove she deserved it. Just a lot of attention, she said instead. The conversation moved on, but Kaliegh sat there feeling isolated, like she'd crossed into territory where she couldn't fully celebrate because she was too busy proving she belonged there. After school, she had a meeting with Mrs. Whitmore about her duties as pageant queen. Appearances at school events, representing Jefferson High at regional competitions, photo shoots for promotional materials. Now Kaliegh, Mrs. Whitmore said, voice carefully neutral. There's been some feedback about your win. Kaliegh's stomach tightened. What kind of feedback? Some parents have expressed concerns. They feel the judging may have been influenced by external factors. They're questioning whether the decision was made fairly. The air changed, that heavy, familiar weight. External factors, Kaliegh repeated. You mean my race? Mrs. Whitmore looked uncomfortable. I'm not saying that. I'm just telling you what's been said. Some people feel that perhaps the judges were trying to make a statement rather than selecting based purely on performance. My performance was excellent. I answered every question well. My talent piece was strong. I looked beautiful in my evening gown. Of course, I'm not questioning that. I'm just preparing you for the reality that some people will question it. We'll assume that diversity considerations played a role. Kaliegh stared at this woman. This white woman who'd run this pageant for years, who'd overseen 23 consecutive white winners without ever questioning whether those decisions were fair. Let me understand, Kaliegh said slowly. For 23 years, only white girls won, and nobody questioned that. But I win once, and suddenly we need to examine whether the judging was fair? Mrs. Whitmore's face flushed. That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? Silence. Uncomfortable, loaded silence. I'm saying you should be prepared for criticism. That's all. Kaliegh left that office feeling sick. The crown on her head suddenly felt less like an achievement and more like a target, a symbol that would forever be questioned, diminished, explained away as anything except what it was, earned. That evening, her phone buzzed constantly. Social media was on fire. Her pageant photo had been shared hundreds of times. The comments were a battlefield. So beautiful. This is what representation looks like. Finally, someone who looks like me winning. They only gave it to her because she's black. This is reverse racism. She doesn't even look like a beauty queen. Affirmative action strikes again. Each negative comment was a small cut. Individually minor, collectively devastating. Her father found her crying in her room, phone face down on the bed. What happened? She told him. About the note, about Mrs. Whitmore, about the comments, about how winning was supposed to feel good, but instead felt like being under attack. Every achievement I have, someone will question it, she said, voice breaking. Every success will be attributed to diversity initiatives instead of my actual abilities. How do I live like that? Her father sat down beside her. You live by knowing your truth, by holding on to what you know about yourself even when the world tries to convince you otherwise. But it's exhausting, Dad. Constantly having to prove I'm enough. Constantly defending my right to exist in spaces. Constantly being told my victories aren't real. I know, baby. I know. He pulled her close. But here's what they don't understand. They're not questioning you. They're questioning a system that finally, for one moment, acknowledged beauty in a form they're not used to. That scares them. Because if you can be beautiful with your natural hair, if you can win without conforming, then everything they've been told about standards and acceptability might be a lie. Kaliegh wiped her eyes. So I'm threatening their worldview just by existing. Exactly. And that's not your burden to carry, that's theirs. She thought about that, about how her presence, her win, her refusal to conform had disrupted something, had forced people to confront their own biases, their own assumptions, their own complicity in a system that had excluded people who looked like her. The crown sat on her dresser, small, sparkly, deceptively simple, but carrying weight that had nothing to do with metal and rhinestones. It was the weight of representation, the weight of being first, the weight of knowing that every move she made would be scrutinized, that every mistake would be magnified, that every success would be questioned. But it was also proof. Proof that closed doors could be opened. Proof that standards could be challenged. Proof that beauty did exist in forms that history had tried to erase. Kaliegh picked up the crown, felt its weight in her hands. Heavy. Yes, but also hers. And nobody could take that away, no matter how hard they tried to diminish it. She'd won, not perfectly, not without cost, not without facing the ugly reality of how society treats black excellence. But she'd won. And that victory, complicated as it was, mattered. For her, for Amara, for every black girl who needed to see someone who looked like her refusing to be invisible. The crown was heavy, but she was strong enough to carry it. And she would, with her head up, with her natural hair proud, with her dignity intact. Because that's what resilience looked like. Not the absence of struggle, but the refusal to be broken by it. 3 months after the pageant, Kaliegh stood in front of her graduating class as valedictorian. Cap and gown, honor cords draped around her neck, natural hair styled in elegant twists pinned beneath her cap. She looked out at the crowd, saw her family in the third row, her father with tears already in his eyes, her mother beaming. Amara holding a sign that said, "That's my sister," in glitter letters. She saw her classmates, some who'd supported her, some who'd questioned her, some who'd learned from watching her refuse to shrink. She saw teachers, administrators, community members, all gathered to celebrate achievement, to mark transition, to witness young people stepping into their futures. And she thought about how far she'd come, not in distance but in understanding. Her speech wasn't about the pageant, wasn't about hair or beauty or standards. It was about something deeper, about the courage it takes to exist authentically in a world that constantly asks you to perform. "We've been told our whole lives to fit in," she began. "To follow the rules, to meet expectations, to become what others need us to be. And there's wisdom in learning to navigate spaces, in understanding context, in developing the skills to move through the world." She paused. Let the words settle. "But there's also danger in losing yourself in that process. In shrinking so much to fit that you forget your actual size. In performing so well that you forget what's real." She could see heads nodding. Not everyone, but enough. People recognizing truth when they heard it. "I spent a lot of this year learning that lesson, learning the difference between adaptation and erasure, between code switching and self-betrayal, between being strategic and being invisible." She thought about Marcus's comment in the hallway, about the note on her locker, about Mrs. Whitmore's coded language, about every moment someone had suggested she was too much or not enough, that she needed to change to be acceptable. They'll tell you that the problem is you, that if you just adjusted, if you just conformed, if you just made yourself smaller or quieter or more palatable, everything would be easier. And they're right. It would be easier. For them. But what would it cost you? The question hung in the air. I'm not saying don't learn to navigate spaces. I'm saying don't disappear in the process. I'm saying remember who you are even when you're code switching. I'm saying your authenticity matters, even when it's inconvenient for other people. She looked directly at Amara. Her baby sister, 9 years old now, watching with wide eyes and absolute faith. For those of you coming up behind us watching, learning from what we do, I want you to know this. You don't have to earn the right to exist as yourself. You don't have to apologize for taking up space. You don't have to shrink to make other people comfortable. Her voice strengthened. Will it be hard? Yes. Will people question you? Absolutely. Will you face resistance, criticism, and constant pressure to conform? Without a doubt. But you'll also discover something they don't want you to know. That your presence matters. That your voice counts. That your existence, exactly as you are, is already enough. The applause started before she finished. Building, spreading, becoming something powerful. She concluded her speech. Stepped down from the podium. Took her seat among her classmates. Later at the reception, people came up to her. Some to congratulate, some to take photos, some to tell her how her speech had moved them. But the moment that mattered most came when a young black girl, maybe 13, approached shyly with her mother. "Can I take a picture with you?" the girl asked. "Of course." As they posed together, the girl whispered, "I saw you win the pageant. I saw your hair. And I stopped straightening mine." Kaliegh felt her throat tighten, looked at this child with her beautiful natural hair, with her confident smile, with her knowledge that she was beautiful exactly as she was. "You're gorgeous," Kaliegh said. "Don't let anybody tell you different." "I won't because you didn't." That exchange, that simple moment, that's what mattered more than the crown, more than the scholarship, more than the title. One girl seeing another and learning that resistance was possible. That authenticity was achievable. That you could exist in your natural state and still be excellent, still be beautiful, still be enough. That evening, Kaliegh sat in her room, packing for college. The crown sat on her shelf now, next to her diploma and her valedictorian medal. Symbols of achievement, yes, but also reminders of the cost, the struggle, the weight of being first. Her mother came in, sat on the edge of her bed. "You did good, baby. Better than good. You changed things." "Did I, though? Or did I just prove I could exist in a system that still needs to change?" "Both," her mother said. "You proved you could exist in it, and in doing so, you exposed what needed to change. That's how it works. Progress isn't one big moment. It's accumulated small acts of refusal." Kaliegh thought about that. About all the small refusals she'd made. Refusing to straighten her hair after that rainstorm. Refusing to accept coded language without challenge. Refusing to shrink in spaces that expected her to disappear. "I'm tired, Mama." tired of always having to be strong, to be a symbol, to carry the weight of representation. I know, and you don't have to carry it alone. There are others fighting this same fight, and there will be more coming up behind you, made braver by watching you refuse to break. That night, Kaliegh looked at herself in the mirror one last time before leaving for college. Saw a girl who'd been called Brillo pad and decided to wear a crown instead. Saw someone who'd been told she wasn't beautiful and chose to define beauty on her own terms. She thought about everything that had happened, the pain, the triumph, the complexity of it all. And she realized something important. The story wasn't over. This wasn't a neat ending where everything was resolved and racism was defeated and beauty standards were dismantled. The struggle would continue. At college, in the workplace, in every space she entered, where her natural presence disrupted comfortable assumptions. But she was ready for it, not because it would be easy, but because she'd learned something fundamental. Her worth wasn't up for debate. Her beauty wasn't subject to approval. Her right to exist as herself wasn't conditional. She'd carried the weight of other people's expectations long enough, had performed acceptability until she nearly forgot what authentic looked like. But she remembered now. And remembering was its own form of resistance. Years from now, someone would ask her about that pageant, about being the first black girl with natural hair to win, about what it meant, what it changed, what it cost, and she would tell them the truth. It meant visibility. It changed perception, slowly. It cost more than anyone who hasn't done it can understand. But she would also tell them this: it was worth it. Not because it solved everything, but because it proved something essential. That closed doors can be opened, that standards can be challenged, that one person's refusal to disappear can create space for others to exist. The crown was just a symbol, but what it represented, the courage to be yourself in spaces that expect you to be someone else, that was real. That was powerful. That was a legacy worth leaving. Kaliegh turned off her bedroom light. Tomorrow she'd head to college. New challenges, new spaces, new battles for authenticity and respect. But tonight, she rested, knowing she'd done something that mattered, knowing she'd refused to let silence erase what she'd experienced, knowing she'd left a mark, however small, on a system that had tried to mark her as less than. Some wounds don't make noise when they're inflicted. They accumulate quietly, building up over years of microaggressions and coded language and subtle dismissals. But they leave scars, and scars tell stories, and stories, when we refuse to let them be silenced, can change the world. Not all at once, not perfectly, not without cost, but they can change it. And here, in this moment, in this memory that would outlast the crown and the title and the temporary attention, that's what mattered most. The refusal to let silence swallow the truth, the insistence on being seen, the determination to exist fully and unapologetically, no matter what the world expected. That was Kaliegh's story. That was her victory. That was her legacy, and nobody could take that away. Some wounds don't make noise, but they leave marks. And here we don't let silence erase what was lived. This is what happened. This is what continues to happen. And this is why the memory stays, so the next girl knows she doesn't have to fight alone. Echoes of dignity,